The hard problem of consciousness. Space-time what is reality? So I cannot know what the nature of reality is through my mind because of its limitations and distortions to what's out there. So I fail to know what reality is through my mind, and that mind is it includes the filter, the lenses, the senses, the five senses through which the mind receives what's out there. Unless the mind itself is also a sense. So can the mind by itself sense what is out there? Or perhaps what is out there is already inside the mind. Well, let's listen to these experts go at it. Or they're not debating, but they're trying to define the problem. So here we go. It's well, let's go back to the beginning. For a while, show you who's
Gentlemen, lovely to be with you. Rupert, how are you?
Very well, Simon. Lovely to be with you, and lovely to see you again, Don, as well.
Donald, how are you?
That's Donald Hoffman.
Good to be here, and thanks for
and
inviting
Rupert
me.
Spira.
And it's a privilege to be here with you both.
And who's that?
I've just been finding out you do know each other to
He's
some
the
degree
host.
already. You spent a bit of time together at the SAN conference, for example. So, very first question then is, even though we're going to explore this, to what degree do your views of reality converge? Rupert?
From what I know of your work, Don, the talks that I've heard you give at the SAN conference, and more recently some podcast interviews that I've listened to, that they converge very closely. I would be hard pressed to find any differences between us. Of course, there's quite a big difference between the way we formulate our understanding because of our two different pathways through which we both come to our understanding. But I think if you strip away the formulations and you really get down to the content, we'll see in the conversation, but I can't see that there's much difference between us.
I agree, Rupert. I think that we're substantially in agreement, and I'm frankly just looking forward to filling in some gaps in my understanding from your perspective, and hopefully get some new ideas to push the research forward. So I think that it's wonderful that we're so close that this is almost going to be like a research meeting for me to get some new ideas to push forward on my mathematics.
Right, let's dive in then. I'm going to start with...
Now if we go over here to around here, let's start here, what they're talking about.
Science tells us are false. Good luck trying to boot up a theory.
Sure. And we'll come back to space-time in a second. Rupert, why do you think...
go back to about here.
That whole framework, which has been a wonderful framework for science for centuries, space and time, or space-time being the fundamental reality, that has worked spectacularly well. But the Nobel Prize this year that was just given a few days ago, in fact, I think last weekend, was to three physicists who have experimental confirmation of the prediction of physics that what's called local realism is false, that physical objects don't have real values of their properties like position, momentum, when they're not observed. And so we can go into that. But when local realism is false and space and time are not fundamental, then the assumption that brains and other physical systems that are quote-unquote local realistic systems would create consciousness, that has to go too. We have to rethink from the ground up. So this is not a small thing. Science needs a new foundation. Space-time can't be it. Space-time is doomed. And so we're going to have a new mathematically precise foundation, and that's why again, these are my friends and brilliant colleagues, but we're doomed to fail at solving the hard problem of consciousness if we assume that space and time are fundamental, and objects in space and time, like neurons. We cannot solve the problem that way because those assumptions, our best science tells us, are false. And so if we start with assumptions that our science tells us are false, good luck trying to boot up a theory.
Sure. And we'll come back to space-time in a second. Rupert, why do you think, or in fact, no, I remember you saying in one interview, what makes you think a scientist is qualified to make observations about the nature of reality, whereas someone interested in the nature of consciousness is not? And I remember the answer to your question was not a particularly satisfactory one. So can we just flip that back round? And what makes someone interested in the nature of reality, like yourself, qualified to make observations about the nature of reality in the same way that scientists with their instruments and technologies, etc., are?
Because all the research that a scientist does, they do with the faculties of their mind, namely the faculties of thought and perception. And reality cannot be known through the mind, through thought and perception. So there's a lot that scientists can and obviously do with their minds. But the one thing that no scientist will ever do, and indeed no person will ever do, is know the nature of reality through the faculties of their mind. Why? Because our minds impose their own limitations on everything that they know or perceive. In other words, the mind looks at reality, but reality appears to that mind in accordance with its own limitations. Just as one who looks at snow through orange-tinted glasses, they are looking at the snow, but the snow will appear orange. Why? Because of the lens through which they perceive it. All science, and this may be true of most scientists, unlike the introspective ones like Don, who also meditate, but the vast majority of scientists investigate reality with their minds. It's the wrong tool. By the mind, I mean our conceiving and perceiving faculties. That's not to say that the work a scientist does with thought and perception is not valid. Of course, it's immensely valid, but it's not the right tool for researching reality. So that is why somebody who's not a scientist, or doesn't use their mind in a scientific way, by scientific I mean the conventional definition of the word scientific, is equally qualified to explore the nature of reality, as is someone with a scientifically trained mind.
So when people talk about the hard problem of consciousness, as they have done for decades, what's your take?
Yes. I think the days of the debate about the hard problem of consciousness are numbered.
The days about the hard problem of consciousness are numbered. Then does that mean that's gonna be solved? Or it's unsolvable?
is no hard problem of consciousness.
There is
What's
no
really
hard problem.
interesting is a hard problem of matter.
Oh,
That's a really interesting question. The hard problem of consciousness is like the problem of how screens are generated by movies, how the sky is generated by clouds, how the ocean is generated by waves. That's the hard problem of consciousness. The answer is it's not. It's based on a massive assumption, namely that matter is the fundamental reality of the universe, and as Don very well described the hard problem of consciousness, that matter eventually gives rise to consciousness. It's in time. I think in the not too distant future we will view this perspective in the same way that we now look back on the flat Earth theory or the geocentric universe theory, the theory that the sun travels around the Earth. The idea that matter is the fundamental reality of the universe and gives rise to consciousness will find its place alongside these kinds of ideas. So, but what's really interesting, if consciousness is the fundamental reality, how then does the apparently physical world contained in time and space, how does that arise from consciousness? That's the hard problem of matter. That's a really interesting question.
Yes.
what? So does that mean that the hard problem of consciousness is not a problem to solve because it's unsolvable, because consciousness is fundamental, and so the hard problem to solve is the hard problem of matter? How does consciousness derive matter? We're creating matter. We're collectively creating matter. So we're gods, godlets. So that when the tree falls in the forest and no one is there, there is no sound. But when someone's there, there is the sound. But what about the tree falling? Oh, there was no one there. Did it fall? Well, someone could go by there and find that it fell. And then during the falling process, it must have created a sound, right? Because we could have put a tape recorder in the forest and have it running, and then the tree falls, and then we play back the tape recorder, and we find the moment where the tree fell, and it would have produced a sound. So what's that tape recorder then? Is the tape recorder a consciousness recording device? Okay. So, thank you, friends, enemies, Romans, and kind mothers for watching this.